Hello everyone. In this presentation, we are going to cover remaining topics of HTML, that is HTML frames, forms and controls, text boxes, buttons, that is radio and checkbox, and list boxes. What is form? HTML form is a section of document containing the normal contents, markup, special elements called as controls, that is checkboxes, radio buttons, menus, etc. and labels on those controls. Users generally complete a form by modifying its controls like entering the text, selecting the menu items, etc. before submitting the form to an agent for processing, for example to the web server or to a mail server. Consider what are controls. Users interact with the forms through named controls. A control's control name is given by its name attribute. The scope of the name attribute for a control within a form element is the form element. Each control has both an initial value and a current value, both of which are character strings. So now, in general, you can say that a control's initial value may be specified with control element's value attribute. However, the initial value of text area element is given by its content, and initial value of object element in a form is determined by object implementation. The form element is used to create HTML form for user input. So you can define it this way: form, then form elements slash form. The form element is a container for different types of input elements like text fields, checkboxes, radio buttons, submit buttons, etc. Next is input element. The HTML input element is the most used form element. The input element can be displayed in many ways depending on the type attribute. Here are some examples. Input type is equal to text. So it displays a single line text input field. Input type is equal to radio. So it displays radio button for selecting one of many choices. Input type is equal to check. So it displays checkbox for selecting zero or more of many choices. Input type is equal to submit. It displays submit button for submitting the form. If you say input type is equal to button, so it displays a clickable button. The label element. The label tag defines a label for many form elements. The label element is useful for screen reader users because the screen reader will read out loud the label when the user focus on the input element. The label element also help users who have difficulty on clicking on very small regions like radio buttons or checkboxes, because when the user clicks the text within the label element, it toggles the radio button or checkbox. The for attribute of the label tag should be equal to the ID attribute of input element to bind them together. A control's initial value does not change. Thus, when a form is reset, each control's current value is reset to its initial value. If a control does not have an initial value, the effect of form reset on that control is undefined. When a form is submitted for processing, some controls have their name paired with their current value, and these pairs are submitted with the form. Those controls for which name value pairs are submitted are called as successful controls. Now consider the various types of control. HTML defines the following control types. First is buttons. You may create three types of buttons, that is submit, reset and push. submit buttons. When activated, a submit button submits a form. A form may contain more than one submit button. Reset button. When activated, a reset button resets all the controls to their initial values. Push buttons, they have no default behavior. Each push button may have client-side scripts associated with the element's event attribute. When an event occurs, for example, the user presses the button or releases, the associated script is triggered. You should specify the scripting language of a push button script through a default script declaration. We create the buttons with the button element or input element. Next is checkboxes. Checkboxes are on-off switches that may be toggled by the user. A switch is on when the control element's check attribute is set. When a form is submitted, only on checkbox controls can become successful. Several checkboxes in a form may share the same control name. Thus, for example, checkboxes allow the users to select several values for the same property. The input element is used to create a checkbox control. Consider about radio buttons. They are like checkboxes except that when several share the same control name, they are mutually exclusive. When one is switched on, all others with the same name are switched off. The input element is used to create a radio button control. If no radio button is in a set sharing the same control name is initially on, then user agent behavior for choosing which control is initially on is undefined. At all times, exactly one of the radio button in a set is checked. If none of the input elements of a set of radio buttons specified checked, then the user agent must check the first radio button of the set initially. Next is menus. Menus offers users option from which to choose. The select element creates the menu in combination with op group and option elements. Text input. You may create two types of controls that allow users to input the text. The input element creates a single line input control and the text area element creates multi-line input controls. In both cases, the input text becomes control's current value. File select. This control type allows the user to select files so that their contents may be submitted with a form. The input element is used to create a file select control. Hidden controls. Users may create controls that are not rendered but those values are submitted with a form. Users generally use this control type to store the information between client-server exchanges that would otherwise be lost due to stateless nature of HTTP. Next is object controls. Users may insert generic objects in forms such that associated values are submitted along with other controls. The elements used to create controls generally appear inside a form element but may also appear outside of a form element. Control types created with input. The control type defined by the input element depends on the value of the type attribute. Next is text. It creates a single line text input control. Password. It is like text, but the input text is rendered in such a way as to hide the characters. For example, a series of asterisks will appear when you type a password. This control type is used for sensitive inputs such as password. The current value is the text entered by the user. Okay. Next is checkbox. It creates a checkbox. Radio, it creates a radio button. Submit, creates a submit button. Image. It creates a graphical submit button. The value of the src attribute specifies the URI of the image that will decorate the button. For accessibility reasons, you should provide alternate text for the image via the alt attribute. When a pointing device is used to click on the image, the form is submitted and the click coordinates pass to the server. The X value is measured in pixels from the left of the image and the Y value in pixels from the top of the image. The submitted data includes name.x is equal to x value and name.y is equal to y value, where name is the name of the name attribute and x value and y value are the x and y coordinate values. If the server takes different action depending on the location clicked, users of non-graphical browser will be in problem. For this reason, users should consider alternate approaches like use a client-side image map together with scripting, use multiple submit buttons in place of a single graphical submit button. Next is reset. It creates a reset button. Button, it will create a push button. You should use the value of the value attribute as the button's label. Hidden will create a hidden control. File, it creates a file select control. Consider the example of form containing input control. The following sample HTML fragment defines a simple form that allows the user to enter a first name, last name, email address, and gender. When the submit button is activated, the form will be sent to the program specified by the action attribute. Form action is equal to, give the URL, method is equal to post, P first name, input type is equal to text, name is equal to first name, then break, last name, then email, then input type is equal to radio, then next is input type is equal to radio, second radio button, and submit. So the form will look like this. HTML form is used to collect the user input. The user input is most often sent to the server for processing. For example, first name, then some text box will appear and you are inputting the name of the person and last name. How to define the text field? So input type is equal to text. It defines a single line input field for text input. For example, a form with two text input fields will look this way. Form label for is equal to f name, then first name slash label, then input type is equal to text, id is equal to f name, name is equal to f name. Do it for last name, label for is equal to l name, last name, then input type is equal to text, id is equal to l name is equal to l name. So you will get the output this way. Consider how to create radio buttons. So define this way, input type is equal to radio. Radio buttons let the user select one of a limited number of choices. For example, if you want to create 3 radio buttons, male, female and other, so you can write the simple form this way. Form input type is equal to radio, id is equal to male, name is equal to gender, value is equal to male. Label for is equal to male, then male slash label. Do it for female and other. So your output will look this way. Consider how to create checkboxes. So use this way. Input type is equal to checkbox. So that will define a checkbox. So it will let a user select 0 or more options of a limited number of choices. So for example, if you want to create 3 checkboxes, I have a bike, I have a car, and I have a boat. So create a form this way. Form input type is equal to checkbox, ID is equal to vehicle 1, name is equal to vehicle 1, give the name and value, value is equal to bike. Do this for remaining 2 options. So your output will look this way. Next, how to create submit button. So define input type is equal to submit. So it will define a button for submitting the form data to a form handler. The form handler is typically a file on the server with a script for processing the input data. Consider one example with submit button. So form action, then you are giving the two fields, that is first name and last name. So label for is equal to f name, first name, slash label, then input type you define, then first name the way you have defined, same way you do it for last name, then input type is equal to submit. So your output will look this way. Consider how to create single line text input controls. So this control is used for items that require only one line of user input, such as the search boxes or names. They are created using HTML input tag. For example, consider a single line input used to take first name and last name. Consider a simple program and output will be shown this way.
I'm giving you some programs of HTML, so you type them and get the output. This is another program where we have used checkbox.